Hello everyone, Underdog Chris here, back to bring you all another video. This time, I will be pitching a theory that I've had for years, which is Yugi Muto's tragic fate after his time in the Duel Monsters anime concluded. And note that I actually said the anime, and this is for a few reasons. Now, one could argue that Yugi has gone through no such tragedies considering the Dark Side of Dimensions movie gives the DM cast a proper send-off. However, people do tend to forget that the Dark Side of Dimensions movie was a continuation of the manga storyline, not the anime, and we know as such because of Kaiba's hyperfixation on wanting to rematch the Pharaoh and not acknowledging Yugi's strength until the tail end of the movie. And for some reason, the anime made the decision to have Seto Kaiba present during the Millennium World arc when the gang goes back in time to ancient Egypt. And they also had him be present during the final ceremonial battle between Yugi and Yami Yugi, otherwise known as Pharaoh Atem by this point. Anime Kaiba witnessing for himself firsthand how Yugi defeated the God Cards and the Pharaoh had gained respect for Yugi, and in a sense had his own closure. But in the manga, Kaiba's story in Duel Monsters concluded after Battle City, and he's never heard from again until the Duel Links and DSOD prequel manga Transcend game. I do want to make it clear that I will not be taking DSOD into account and will instead only take into account what's taken place in the anime canon's timeline, and so with that being said, I'll be getting it started. So here's how the theory goes. I believe that after Yugi defeated the Pharaoh, he graduates high school. However, none of the DSOD stuff happens in this timeline. Anzu or Taya in the dub goes to America to study dance, and the other side characters like Joey, Tristan, and Bakura go off and do their own thing. However, I think that Yugi actually gave up and retired from dueling shortly after he graduated, and in the 10-year gap between the OG anime and Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Well, why do I think this exactly? It's the fact that Yugi Muto's deck was actually on display at Duel Academia in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, which is a clear sign that he's retired. Had he not been retired, there would be no reason to have his deck on display, and this is because I believe that he's lost his own will to duel. This sounds tragic, but I believe that with the Pharaoh gone in the anime's version of events, and without the brief reunion that Yugi gets with Atem in DSOD, that he just loses the will to duel, much like Vegeta from Dragon Ball actually lost the will to fight after the main character, Son Goku, sacrificed himself against Cell. Yugi did not see much of a purpose in dueling anymore without his partner by his side, and so he hangs up his deck and retires with multiple tournament wins under his belt. Solomon Muto in episode 75 of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX states that Yugi went on a journey, and I believe that this was a journey of self-reflection and self-discovery for him to come to terms with himself and try to figure out the meaning of his life. To our knowledge, the only person that Yugi seems to be in communication with still is his grandpa Solomon Muto, and besides Yugi giving Jaden winged Karibo in episode 1, it is of my belief that Yugi has gone on the self-reflective journey throughout the whole show. Now, one could argue that the reason they didn't bring Yugi into the fold was because this was the story of the GX cast, and Yugi had no place in it, and that Yugi would overshadow everyone else. And while that could be true, I do want to think outside the box a little. I would venture to say that Yugi realized that he was past his prime, and on the self-reflective journey, he came to terms with that, letting Jaden and the rest of the GX cast handle all the threats that were going on at Duel Academia. He could have been affected by Darkness/Night Shroud's influence in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. For those that are unfamiliar, Darkness is the main thread of the final season of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and was an embodiment of evil. But while we don't see Yugi's name as one of the ones on that roster, it's safe to say that he was not able to fight the darkness in his heart and succumb to it. Without the powers of the Millenium Puzzle or the Pharaoh to help him, Yugi fell into darkness. That is, until Jaden Yuki swoops in and saves the day. After this, the graduation happens at Duel Academy and Yugi pays Jaden a visit. Yugi sees a lot of himself in Jaden and sees how much Jaden seemed to not really enjoy dueling as much as he used to, something Yugi Muto actually resonates with. Now, with what happens next, the fandom is split. So basically, Jaden holds up the Winged Karibo card to Yugi's deck display, and he gets sent back in time to the past, We don't know how this happened, so I'll just chalk it up to anime BS and just call it a day with that. I always found this weird though. Sure, it could be a dream, but I will be continuing this video on the premise that this duel actually took place. So, why would Yugi need to send Jaden back in time in the first place? Well, this is because the current present-day Yugi, as of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, no longer has that same battling spirit that he once had. He no longer had the soul of a duelist, and so he figured that in order for Jaden to have fun again, that he needed to duel Yugi when he was at his prime, which was when he and Atem shared a body and had Slife with the Sky Dragon, one of the Egyptian gods. I assume that the reason they didn't use the other two god cards in that duel was because they thought it would have been overkill. However, the duel goes on, and Jaden as well as Yugi go back and forth, with each of them giving it their best shot and sending out their most powerful monsters, even their aces, Dark Magician and Elemental Hero Neos. We never figure out the result of this duel as it ends on a cliffhanger, and Jaden suddenly ends up in a forest. But to tie up this loose end, we know that in Bonds Beyond Time, the 10th anniversary Duel Monsters movie, that Jaden meets past Yugi again and doesn't make a single reference to their duel. I think that after the duel takes place, Jaden gets sent back to his present timeline and any memories that Yugi and Atem had of the duel were wiped somehow. And Jaden, not wanting to make any more time paradoxes out of this, decides to leave it be. As for Yugi, I'd say that he lives on for another several years, maybe another decade or two, but then a great disaster happens about 17 years prior to Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, which is the third show that takes place many years after both Duel Monsters and GX. The incident that took place was Zero Reverse. Zero Reverse was a great disaster that destroyed much of the old Domino City, splitting a huge chunk of it into its own island known as Satellite. Meanwhile, the other portion was repurposed into Neo Domino City, the main city hub for Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. Now, you may be wondering, where the heck is Yugi? Well, in all honesty, I'd say it's very likely that Yugi, Kaiba, and anyone else from Duel Monsters or GX that happened to be in the city at the time likely died very gruesome and untimely deaths. Which sounds a bit dark, but I do think there's more to this than meets the eye. We all know how Iliaster made Roman Goodwin overload the Energy Reactor to destroy Domino City, and this was in order to get Destiny in motion with the Signers and the Dark Signers. But I think that Iliaster had multiple goals to fulfill with this. I mean, let's be honest, Iliaster themselves are a bit of a shady group, and I consider them more like the Yu-Gi-Oh! Illuminati. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that Yugi or Seto Kaiba could have caught wind of Iliaster's schemes, and Iliaster as a group probably saw Yugi and Kaiba as threats to their goals. Despite not having the spirit of Atem with Yugi anymore, they probably still saw Yugi as someone that could possibly get in their way. And so, 17 years before the start of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, Yugimoto dies an untimely death and meets a tragic end in the wake of the Zero Reverse disaster. And with all that being said, that's about it for this video. I really enjoyed making this one as it's my first time tackling an anime theory. I've always seen people making theories or what-if scenarios based on anime or other mediums that I enjoy, so I figured it was about time that I try it out for myself. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have an amazing day. Thank you.